Here we are in Studio B of the McNeil International Film Studios in beautiful
Baja Tustin.
That's it. And today we're talking about stocks and flows. We'll talk about the difference between a stock variable and a flow variable, and we will give two fairly interesting examples and maybe consequential examples of stocks versus flows, but they play into later subjects and you should know the difference. So here they are. A stock is a variable that can be counted, but at a point in time. So, how many gallons in the bathtub? Here's my bathtub. And a flow is a variable that has to be measured per unit of time. So, if we have our beautiful bathtub here, it has this much water in it, and so the stock of water is this. How many gallons are in the tub at any given moment? You can count it at a point in time. But then there's a flow in and a flow out of the tub. And depending on whether the flow in is greater than the flow out, then the stock of water may rise or fall. Anyway, it's pretty obvious. So the question then is, what are examples of variables that are either a stock or a flow? Wealth. Wealth is a stock. Because as of today, can you count your assets and total it all up and say my wealth as of this moment is this much? Income. Is income a stock or a flow? Well, if you are confused about it, I would like to let you know that I would like to hire you, and I will pay you $100,000. Will you work for me? He said yes. Federico said yes. And, but what Federico doesn't know is that income, $100,000, needs to specify the time period. And the answer is $100,000 per decade. That's 10 years. Will you work for me, Federico? He said yes, he really doesn't get it. Anyway, income is a flow because it has to be measured per unit of time. Water. The water coming into your house is a flow. How do you measure it? You put a meter on the water pipe, and how much water passes by that meter in a month or a week or whatever their billing period is, that's the amount of water they'll bill you with. Pool water is a stock. How much water is in the pool at this very moment? It can be counted. Investment and inventories are the two uses that we're going to put this stock versus flow concept to. So let's start with investment. Investment in this sense is gross spending on newly produced capital, which is basically physical capital. And there is something called the capital stock, which is the accumulated stock. The capital stock would be the amount of capital that exists in the economy right now. Now there's a flow in. There's a flow into the capital stock, and there's a flow out. And the difference between the two is the net change in the capital stock. Net change in the capital stock. So in this case, if the flow in is greater than the flow out, then the stock will rise. There will be a net increase in the capital stock, and if the flow out is greater than the flow in, there will be a net decrease in the capital stock. So what is the flow in? The flow in is gross investment. So here's gross investment. I sub G is gross investment. And the flow out is called capital consumption. Capital consumption is normally called depreciation. They're the same thing. Capital consumption and depreciation are the same thing. But there's a real concept to depreciation. It's not just a scam that accountants use to shelter income for tax purposes. The fact of the matter is that as capital is used to produce things, it is consumed, it is used. So if you have a stamping machine that can stamp 20 million stamps apart, just stamp them out, when it has stamped 5 million parts, it's half consumed, it's half gone. These markers, they are capital, and as I use them, the ink is consumed, and at some point they fall over dead and they have to be replaced. So when the flow in, investment gross, is greater than the flow out, then the net change in the capital stock, that is net investment, is positive. So here's net investment, which is gross investment minus depreciation. Almost every year the flow in the United States is greater than the flow out and the capital stock increases. There are only 2 times, I think, where net investment was negative. That is where the depreciation was greater than the gross investment. And that was during World War II, where we didn't care about our capital stock, we cared about producing war material for the war in World War II. And the second one was in the late 90s, when companies had just produced so many capital goods they just didn't need anymore. So that was the only other time. But what happens when the net investment is positive? What that means is the capital stock is rising. And capital is one of the resources, and an important one for economic growth. And when the capital stock increases, other things constant, what happens is we get economic growth. That's an outward shift of the production possibilities frontier. What if net investment is negative? It has been at various times. In the old Soviet Union, the capital was wearing out faster than it was being replaced, and the net investment was negative as the capital stock shrank. If that's the case, then other things constant, your production possibilities frontier would shift inward. If net investment is 0, we would expect a relatively stagnant economy. That is, not much growth and not much decline either. So that's using the idea of stock and flow to talk about the capital stock and net investment. Next little bit has to do with inventories. Inventories are produced goods that businesses keep and are available for immediate sale. So everything that's in all the stores, Home Depot, they have enormous inventories. Manufacturing companies, they will produce and put it in their warehouse so it's ready to be shipped if the orders come in. The buyers don't have to wait. So the flow in to the stock of inventory, that's this stock here. The flow in is production. If it's a manufacturing business, and the flow out is sales. So the production goes into the warehouse, and then when it's sold, the trucks back up to the loading docks and they take it out of the warehouse and ship it off to the customers. So the flow in is production and the flow out is sales. Can inventories be controlled? That is, if you're a business and you keep an inventory, can you accurately predict what your inventory will be, or can you control it and keep it at exactly what you want it to be? That's what all those weekly meetings are about. And the answer is no, you can't, because if you're a producer or if you're a seller of any kind, you can control how much you produce, so you can control the flow in, but you can't control the flow out. Customers do that. And will it always be different from what you hope it will be? Yeah, you're always going to be off. That's the point. And there will always be a little bit of unplanned and undesired inventory changes. Now, sometimes inventory changes are good in the sense that they are planned and they are welcomed, really. Planned and desired. And this is before the December selling season. Stores build up their inventories in anticipation of higher sales, and they're right, and that's a good thing that inventories are rising. But if these inventory increases are undesired and unanticipated, then that's a problem to the firm, because they have to cut back on their production. If their inventories are going up, that means they're producing more than they're selling, and they have to cut back on their production. So in a normal, healthy economy, some industries, their sales are going up and they're experiencing more sales than production, and others more production than sales, and everybody's adjusting their output continuously. But this is macroeconomic. So we're talking about if there is an unplanned and undesired increase in inventories across the economy, then that has macro effects that we're going to talk about. So if there is throughout the economy an increase in inventories, unplanned and undesired, then what will be the response? And the answer is, with inventories, unsold inventories piling up, the first thing that happens is that they drop the prices, they tend to drop the prices and run sales and so forth. And the second is that they cut production. They cut production. In order to do that, they have to lay off people, and it's not just the labor, but it's also the other resource suppliers, raw materials and so forth. When they lay off people or stop buying the resources, incomes go down in the economy. And when incomes go down in the economy, the spending goes down because people have less income. And that decrease in spending causes sales to slow even further. And so that puts additional upward pressure on inventories and additional cutbacks. So when this little production decrease, layoff, incomes decrease, and spending decreases kind of runs through, then it starts again. It all cycles through again because there are further inventory increases. And this creates the dreaded downward spiral. And it shows that the economy has momentum effects, that once it starts going down, it wants to spiral down for a while. That's the dreaded downward spiral, and it comes from a situation in which there is unplanned and undesired inventory accumulation, that's production greater than sales, kind of taking place throughout the economy. The other possibility is an inventory decrease that is unplanned and undesired. That means that sales would be greater than production. And so, since the stuff's flying out the doors of the warehouses faster than it's being produced and put in there, then that means that inventories would decrease. And the response to decreasing inventories, generally speaking, is upward pressure on prices. And then we start this business about increasing production. So production would increase to try and catch up on these inventories and build them up, which means they have to, when they want to produce more, they have to hire more people and buy more other types of resources. Then when they start hiring people, incomes generally in the economy start rising because workers are working more and longer hours and more working and so forth. And spending goes up with higher income. And as soon as spending goes up again, then that puts a further downward pressure on inventories, and the cycle starts again. And so what we get is a spiral again. But is it the dreaded downward? No, it is the upward spiral. And it's not just the upward spiral, it's the euphoric upward spiral. So the point is that the inventories play a crucial role in the momentum and direction of changes in the economy. So a quick question is, if aggregate quantity produced, that's the amount produced in the economy, is 593 billion, but if the aggregate quantity purchased is 602, can you tell what's happening to inventories here? And the answer is, more is being purchased than is being produced, which means inventories are decreasing because more is being purchased than is produced. And what will be happening to prices? There will be upward pressure on the prices. And what will happen to production? In order to catch up on the inventories, firms will start producing more. In order to do that, they have to hire and pay people, have a bigger wage bill and so forth. And this will indeed trigger a spiral. What kind of spiral? The euphoric upward spiral. I hope you've enjoyed this little discussion about stocks and flows and the applications of stocks and flows to the issues of inventories and investment. That's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.